All right, good morning and welcome to PACT's Technology Executive Roundtable. I'm Dean Miller, the President and CEO of PACT, and we have a terrific program for you this morning on workforce trends and strategies in a remote world. Now, you might say, this is kind of stale information, but you're not going to get stale information this morning. And we and the panelists were just reflecting on the discussion we had as an organization and as a Technology Executive Roundtable right before the lockdown. So get ready for a really good and dynamic dialogue around this topic. We, of course, are grateful and thankful for many different organizations supporting, as you can see listed here, AMETEK, Anexinet, Boomi, Cigniti, Comcast Business, Principal, RSM, SAP, SEI, and Slalom. We're thankful for all of you and also for your engagement here. Reminder, this is a webinar. Please stay muted. You can ask questions. You can certainly raise your hand. We can do that, but the most efficient way, as you know, is to utilize chat. So we will monitor the chat box throughout. Start using it as soon as you feel the need to, and we will certainly monitor it and make sure that our moderator responds and has the panelists respond. After the program at around 9:30, 9:35, we're going to move over to a REMO room. Where we can continue the conversation in small group tables, face-to-face. That link will be provided in the chat at that time period. And without further ado, let me introduce our moderator. So our moderator, no stranger to PACT, is an executive within Vanguard, has been engaged with PACT for many, many years, both in our forum programming, our Technology Executive Roundtable forum. And so welcome, Srinath.
Awesome. Thanks for the great kickoff, Dean, and welcome everybody to the session. As Dean mentioned, I'm Srinath Chigullapalli, Senior IT Leader at Vanguard. So these TER sessions, the Technology Executive Roundtable sessions, we've traditionally focused on the challenges we faced as leaders and how we've adapted to these ever-changing circumstances. So typically, we talked about how technology has been disrupting and how we've been adapting to the changes, right? So whether we've had discussions about AI, we've had discussions about cloud, we've had discussions about several different technologies, right? Today's session, we want to focus on how each of our organizations has evolved to succeed in the last year. It's been very, very unique the last year and a half. And it has thrown up new challenges, and we've kind of, each organization has adapted. So we want to learn from each of you, obviously the distinguished panel that we have, but also hear from each of you how your organizations has evolved. And I'm especially interested in learning how organizations are looking forward to leveraging different talent pools, ensuring that, in a remote world, we have that sense of collaboration. Which is really important to kind of drive new ideas and innovation in a hybrid environment. I'm also thrilled to welcome three distinguished panelists who will lead the conversation for us. As you'll see, they span very different industries, face unique challenges in their domains, and then we're all looking forward to learning from them and having a great discussion. So we, like Dean mentioned, we have set aside some time for Q&A, but feel free to use the chat window. So to kick off the panel, I'm going to ask each of the three panelists to kind of do a quick introduction about themselves, because I know I'm not going to be able to do justice to their backgrounds and their organizations, and talk a little bit about how their organizations operated prior to March, prior to the COVID timeframe, and how they've evolved to meet that challenge. So we'll start off with Kathryn.
Sure, thank you. I'm Kathryn Hartzell, Director of Technology and Innovation Management within the IT department at the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. I've been with the commission for about 8 years, and prior to that, spent about 15 years working for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So my entire background is public sector. The Turnpike Commission is a 552-mile roadway. We operate across the entire state of Pennsylvania. Pre-COVID, we had 3 main office buildings located in Harrisburg and then also in the eastern and western parts of the state. In addition to that, from how we're structured, we've got all of our maintenance sheds, warehouses, and we had our interchange operations as well at each of the interchanges. In response to COVID, we basically over a weekend switched to a cashless system, and we also transitioned to remote work for our office staff. Obviously, our maintenance employees and facilities operations still were reporting to the buildings to do their jobs. But because of the prep that we had done, more so for DR, we didn't really foresee a pandemic coming, but because we were prepared, we were able to make that switch rather quickly and not have much interruption to our operations at all. We did, of course, have some resource impacts and revenue loss as a result of COVID and travel loss, which is, we're still not back to pre-pandemic revenue sources, but we were able during the last year to deliver 100% of our capital plan, particularly in the tech space. So despite all of the challenges that we faced, we were able to still deliver everything that we needed to in our remote space.
Thank you for that, Kathryn. Tom.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Rivera. I'm the Senior Director of IT Operations and Planning for VERTEX Inc. We are a tax technology and services company. Been around for 40 years, headquartered in Eastern Pennsylvania, in the greater Philadelphia area, with some satellite offices that were previously in Sarasota, Florida, Naperville, Illinois, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Frankfurt, Germany. So for us, I was fairly fortunate to be on the West Coast in the few weeks prior to the pandemic. And I started seeing a lot of trends happening out there where they were already starting to make the transition to remote work. So in the very early February timeframe, they were starting to see a lot of companies start to shift and head remote. So I started signaling back. I'm like, we need to prepare for a potential shift in work. Get equipment in. For us, the biggest thing was around logistics, getting in monitors. Because of the nature of our company, it's highly technology driven. People need 2 monitors. They need enhanced internet at home. There's a lot of us assortment of things that people use for their information work loads. So for us, it was really getting ahead of that. And then I believe, in the first week of March, we made the decision to close the office. It was pretty much made on a Thursday at 3:30. It was like, hey, we're not coming back tomorrow. Start to prepare the organization for remote work. So, we had made some investments over the prior, 1 to 2 years on bolstering our remote work or bolstering our ability to really work anywhere, just given the nature of some of the programmers and developers that we were bringing on board. So for us, it was an easy shift, just really getting people the equipment they needed at home, was the biggest challenge for us.
Thank you, Tom, for that. Stephen.
Yeah, hi, my name is Steve Hunt. I'm a chief expert for technology and work at SAP. My role, I think, is a little bit different from the other panelists in the sense that I am more person who focuses with our customers and works with our customers a lot, but I also do kind of provide like internal consulting for our own organization, our HR organization. So a brief bit about my background, because it is a little bit different from the other panelists. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by training, which if you're familiar with it, it's not clinical psychology. It's basically the psychology of work. How do you create effective work environments? And what I do at SAP is I study how to use technology to create effective work environments and how is technology changing the environments and that sort of aspect. So for somebody who does what I do, it's been quite 18 months, kind of looking at the intersection of psychology, technology, and work. Now, I can talk a little bit about, an SAP is a big, giant global company. When the pandemic hit, we had insight into it because we have operations like in Italy and stuff. So we saw what was happening around the rest of the world, I think, pretty quickly. We also, I guess, I don't know if I would call it an advantage, but a lot of SAP has always worked remotely. I've never worked in an office. And so I think that the transition went amazingly smoothly. I can only say as an employee, it went really well, but there were huge individual differences. And this is something that I'll probably come back to across our workforce in terms of the experience. Some people said, on average, people said it made their lives better. It was like more flexibility. I don't have to commute. everyone misses being in person, but they don't miss commuting into an office every day. But there were really big differences based on people's like the kind of work people did, and even more so their home office environments. So like in India, where people tended to live in smaller places with, it was like really, really hard because they literally needed a place to work. So the transition went well. I think what I'll talk more about as we get into is, and where I've been more involved with SAP is our decision what to do going forward, where I was involved because I've spoken to literally over 200 organizations and probably more than that in the last 12 months about this topic, and the focus on more about what are we going to do going forward, not about how are we going to make the transition, but what does it look forward, and a lot of these discussions around how does this affect culture, how, what's the right mix, how's it going to affect retention, recruitment, inclusion, and that's what I'll share more. But SAP has really embraced it. We've gone into a full flex. People can work wherever they want, which is interesting because like 3 years ago, at least in the United States, they were saying everyone should come back into offices, and they were co-locating into main offices, which I personally said, this is really stupid. It's not the way of the future. And now we're going completely the opposite way, which probably some significant real estate costs, I suspect, but that's not my part of SAP.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for that perspective on the broader industry. That kind of leads into my second question, which is, we heard about the different challenges each of you has faced as you came along, as you dealt with COVID. What does your return to office strategy look like? Maybe Tom, you can start off that.
Sure. So for us, we are taking a cautious approach to return to office. We've set a tentative date that's continued to slide a little bit. We're not trying to be a game breaker in here, but one area we are focusing on is how to leverage technology for the eventual return to office. So for us, we just put out vaccine mandates for all employees and contractors to return. So if you could understand the logistical issues behind requiring submitting proof of vaccination and all the security, the regulations, and the collection piece behind it. For us, it's, we've shifted using the time between now and when we reopen the office to really get, we're using ServiceNow, their return or their safe workplace module with the vaccine collection application. So a lot of our focus right now in Q4 is going to be spent towards getting that going, getting testing procedures in place. We're going to be requiring testing for visitors. We'll be requiring testing for any exempted employees that, religious or personal exemptions that come up. We'll be requiring consistent testing. So we'll be storing both vaccine data and testing data. So we're working through a lot of the nuances of that and making that a good experience for the employee, which is important, right? We want to be able to make sure that it's easy, it's convenient for them, while still making sure that the data is secure and that people can validate the results on the back end. Additionally, we aren't requiring return to office. So we are looking to move to hoteling, 100% hoteling in the building. And individuals can flex into the office as they need to, or flex in for collaboration needs, and then continue to work at home.
And Tom, is that policy uniform across different roles in the company, or is it depending more flexibility at the team level?
So the policy is uniform. It's shifted and went to a couple of different names, and originally it was going to be leader discretion, but they decided to really open it up and just make it uniform across it, because you would get into certain situations where maybe the employee and the leader weren't aligned on it. So taking that that out of the equation really made it a fair playing ground, or a level playing ground for people.
It's helpful. Thank you, Tom. Kathryn, how about your organization?
So I would say we're not quite as far along as what Tom described. We started a transitional period in July that runs through the end of the calendar year, where each department head is able to select the model that they would like for their staff amid 3 options, either fully remote, hybrid, or fully back to the office. So we have some departments that have a mandate for staff to report, 2 days a week within certain rules right now. We have other departments that are pretty much still completely remote. So IT and finance have pretty much remained, and HR actually have all pretty much remained fully remote. We started to return more for certain meetings, at least with leadership within IT, but as the Delta variant has emerged, we've kind of pulled back a little bit on that. So part of the transitional period was to allow our leadership to determine how they wanted to approach this. There's been conversation of, and even if we do return to the buildings with some hybrid model, potentially having the buildings closed on Fridays or something along those lines, to also look at the energy savings and the other things that we can get to. But to be honest, I'm not quite sure where we will land with everything, and how this will really flesh out, because there are a lot of different opinions, and also I would say concerns with the public perception, of having empty buildings, and just that perception that who's actually working if the buildings are empty.
Definitely is a unique challenge for your group. Steve, how about SAP? I know you mentioned like SAP has been pretty remote as an organization.
Yeah, what SAP did when this happened, I think it kind of reflects the company itself, which, we do a lot of work internally, but also with our customers about how to use technology to change the nature of work. So I think that gave us a certain advantage that we had a lot of resources internally that had kind of dealt with transformation, not at this level, but, it's pretty significant transformations helping our customers. And so we kind of turned that internally, and we did a bunch of things. One of the things, I think they did a whole thing across SAP involving talent at all levels to say, what is our philosophy and strategy about the role of an office building? And one of the things, and I'll just share, which I think, because I talked with this customers a lot, we have to remember, an office building is a form of communication technology. There weren't, the first office building was created in 1790, and I'm sharing a little bit of a presentation I did internally here to our own team. I said, we have this idea that we've always had offices. We haven't. They were created about, depending on how you argue it, about 1790. The British Admiralty building was supposedly the first building just built for people to come together and work. All the other places have been like palaces and residences. And it was designed to help people communicate as organizations became larger, taking into account the communication technology available in 1790. And then we just kind of dropped into used it because it was familiar. But if we'd always had the internet and Zoom and all this, we never would have had this everyone going to the office every day like lemmings culture, right? And so that was kind of and that's kind of how SAP thinks, right? We think about how technology both enables and constrains our thinking. And then before we even got into the technology, the technical stuff, we really talked about, the culture. Say, look, hybrid work, it's embracing, it's like a culture, it's embracing a safety culture or a customer service oriented culture. It reflects one's belief about the importance of being physically together. And what we really said is there are good reasons to come together, but there's dark sides. We don't want to be a company, and we probably have this in our company, people that manage based on where you sit. I sometimes joke that, look, if you need to see somebody to manage them, unless you're managing ballet dancers, you're not a good manager, And this is borne out in our work with our customers too. I think being on site allows you to mask bad management practices. When everyone's remote, you have to be far better at setting goals, giving feedback, having clarification, more purposeful, and there's a lot of benefits to that. But it does require you to be better managers. So we said we don't want to think that buildings are a tool for management. They're not. They're a tool for communication and collaboration. The second thing we really talked about is what people really want. It's not about whether you want to go back to the office. What everyone wants is flexibility. We want to be able to decide what makes sense for us, given our job, our work preferences, our home office environment. Don't tell me to go somewhere just to tell me to go somewhere. It's called freedom. People like it, right? So we said we want to maximize flexibility, and that's what our program ended up being called, was Flex, our culture statement. We also, though, recognizing that in addition to flexibility, people want to know how it affects their career. How will it affect how I'm evaluated if I don't see my boss every day? Do I need to get FaceTime? All that sort of stuff. So we're doing a lot of stuff internally on rethinking our talent management practices to require better goal setting communication. I mean, I think we're good at it, but we definitely need to be better. And we also focused a lot, and I think this is something people don't think enough about, we're really focused on inclusion. It's something that SAP focuses a lot about. Requiring people to physically come to an office space excludes large portions of the workplace, particularly people with primary family care responsibilities. Because if you're the person that's got to go to the school to pick up a sick child, being in an office is much more difficult than if you can balance these things with working remotely. And so SAP also definitely saw this not just as about flexibility, but as a real opportunity for us to employ at a much broader spread. I remember talking to somebody before this happened who's a programmer who is visually impaired, and she said, look, commuting is way harder for me than it is for other people. She said, and so we really are viewing this as a chance to be much more inclusive in people's ability to craft jobs in a way that makes sense for them. So that's what we've really defined. And then as it gets to the tactical stuff about screening and what sort of office spaces, we're so big, it's going to change depending on the country that we're in, the region, the kind of work. So that's a separate conversation that is going on right now. But I think what I really, as a person that works with a lot of companies that do this, what I kind of really liked about how SAP approached this is we didn't dive into all the tactical. It really started with saying, what is our view of the purpose of an office building? And it's changed. We articulated it much more specifically.
Thanks for that context, Steve. So I want to kind of double click into something you said. Hey, you want I agree that I think everybody wants more flexibility. That's where kind of Vanguard is heading to, which is, we used to be like an in-person, everybody come into work 5 days a week, collaborate. But we're moving to a more, when we get back, the future of work will look much more different, which primarily, Mondays and Fridays work from home, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody try to come in. So you can have like in-person collaboration, like emphasis being on like an in-person collaboration. So how did SAP kind of overcome the challenge of how do you collaborate, have those impromptu water cooler conversations? Any good practices that you can share to kind of overcome those, the myth of like, hey, you can't collaborate when you're remote?
I think, it's not something you'll completely overcome, but I think what we've really done is we've confronted some myths about collaboration, like the myth of the hallway conversation. There was research done before the pandemic, and I guess this is what I uniquely bring to this conversation because I've read a lot of this stuff because it's my job, is there was research done before the pandemic looking at office spaces, and they basically found that if you don't sit within about 30 feet of a person, you're very unlikely to randomly run into them. We just don't have that many of these hallway conversations, and when we do, they usually aren't about work. They're usually about other things. And we said, you don't want to leave that conversation up to chance. If you want people to interact, create interaction, not just randomly because they both got out of the car at the same time. It's like, let's get much more intentional. And we've done some things like cross-matching, like in the department I am, where it's like you can just sign up and be paired with somebody else you've never worked with and it never functioned. And actually, this is something that's nice about virtual because it's really easy to do, where it would be harder. Like I was paired with a guy who does supply chain work in Florida, and I've learned a bunch from him. I never would have talked to him if I'd relied on running into people in the hallway. So we've really kind of focused on that. I think on the other thing where we're still figuring it out, and this is going to take a while, is remote. I always stress what we've experienced in the last 18 months isn't normal remote work, it's physical isolation. And a big part of remote work is getting together in person, but getting together to be together, not just to sit in the same building. And so we are still really thinking about how we want to redesign our offices, how we want to redesign our spaces. The impact, because we're so big, this has on travel. We used to always say internal facing travel was the first thing to be cut, right? It always to be customer facing. I think we're going to see a shift in that to say, let's take the money that we're saving by having smaller offices, but we still need to get people together. So we need to reallocate that, but bringing people together to be together. But we're going to be working through this for months. I mean, this is something we'll never just solve. It's just constantly thinking about, but we think about it in a much different way now.
That's good to know. Any other comments, Tom or Kathryn, on how your organizations are kind of trying to solve the collaboration challenges that we see? Tom, maybe we start with you.
Sure. So, for us, when we went remote, we had several collaboration tools in play. So, we were a WebEx customer, when we were office bound. We had Microsoft Teams, and it was really kind of poor adoption of Microsoft Teams. It was, well, we don't really see the need for understanding, channel messages and one-on-one video calls. And, we had a slow adoption rate. It was really kind of like a boutique tool. The developers kind of liked it because it plugged in and operated like Slack. And then within 4 days of going remote, we had 95% adoption of Microsoft Teams, and it was all self-adoption, right? So for us, we took a bit of a shift. Instead of doing, having people that did traditional technical support for collaboration, we shifted to experiential, right? So really giving people coaching, really giving people how to maximize the tool, for areas that they may or may not understand, because everybody's in different places with this. So you have people in different places in their career, people in different places in technology, and really everybody's trying to figure it out. So for us, it was really pivoting the IT workforce from fixing, being like a pit crew to really being like a coach, for collaboration. So that was our biggest thing, regardless of the tool. And even today we still have split usage of the two tools, given any particular business need.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I can echo the comment about having the right collaboration tools. We used to have, at Vanguard, we used to have a combination of tools for audio conferencing was different from video conferencing and so on. But it was perfect timing that a year before the pandemic, we switched to Teams, and it was a lifesaver in terms of how we were able to kind of seamlessly move from being in person to remote. Kathryn, any comments on the collaboration challenges?
Our story is pretty similar to what Tom described. We had also started with Teams and did not necessarily have great adoption, but we're able to leverage that. And even, some of the simple things like really encouraging everybody to have their cameras on, both us and our consultants and folks we work with, so that we're getting that face time with people and really being present. And starting at the beginning, and when we had to help people and coach them along, we started doing, whether it was more videos on how to use the tools or pushing out information through the weekly newsletters that go out to all staff, giving tips and tricks on how to use the different platforms, or how do you share your system audio, and all of those types of little nuances that really took a while for some people to get up to speed with. So we had a lot of the tools in place. I think it's as much getting to the shift of how do you even organize your work, and how do you organize the way that you can collaborate with people when you're doing it through technology and remotely, instead of being able to sometimes stand in a room together with Post-its and Sharpies and putting things up on the wall. So I think that's a continuing evolution. We certainly have the tech for it, but it's also the new skill set that everybody needs to sort of get up to speed with, I think, as well.
Yeah, if I could build on SAP, because with Kathryn and Thomas, you're trying to get into the collaboration technology. So yeah, we had Teams adoption, no problem. I mean, that was clear. Everyone just was using it, but we were already using it because we already have a lot of virtual global teams anyhow. So it wasn't that big a transition. The big change, I think, Kathryn, that you hit on is we embrace some of the tools we use externally a lot, like Mural. And what we did is we created internal Mural champions, coaches, people that if you were a manager and you were having a team meeting, you could get one of these people that was sort of an expert in Mural, and they would help you as a manager facilitate your team meeting, learning Mural and kind of learning by doing with an expert, which has worked really, really well for us. The other thing that we've made extensive use internally is our employee listening technology. It's like Qualtrics sort of pulse surveys, and that's something that I would say is really important as a psychologist in this whole transition. Is you've got to listen to people all the time, just in small pulses. We're kind of getting tired of doing all those chats and stuff like that we used to do, but in general, you just got to keep a pulse on people because you never know how they're doing. Don't believe averages. This change affects different people very, very differently. So we have to be careful as SAP that we don't fall into, oh, our overall things, averages seem to be going up without realizing one person's getting happier, one person's struggling. So we really tried to listen as much as possible.
That's helpful. I'm going to take, there's a couple of questions in chat from the audience. I'm going to incorporate those in. So Jen asked a question about as companies are, requiring people as they're coming back to, show proof of vaccination. Tom, I think you touched on using like ServiceNow's module to kind of have submit proof of vaccination. Are rest of you using something similar? I know Vanguard's using something from Salesforce, but how about SAP?
We're using something from SAP. See, we have a couple things that not just what we're doing. I'll share on that. There's SAP and there's also our customers. So like in SAP, we have something like Qualtrics has a vaccination like little simple module for screening. So that where we're going to require it, that's what we're starting to implement because it's really simple to use. The other one that I would share that's really interesting that I don't think we're using it, but I know some of our customers are using it, is a technology that links vaccination screening to physical security. And this came out of, it was originally used for things like where you need people to have training certifications to be in physical plants and things like that, where you have sort of a person could be okay one day and not okay the next day kind of thing. And that's been really powerful. Deutsche Bank has been using this, and they talked about it, that it's this linking, not just for vaccination, but they said as you go into more of a remote world, security risk goes up because your office buildings become more like hotel lobbies. Different people are there at different times. And that kind of creates more security risk because, it's easier for a quote stranger to come in and all that other stuff. And so they've said that's really helped them by linking physical security systems, if you have physical access systems, with your HR technology systems that do the screening. So that exists. I don't think we're using it that much internally in SAP because we don't have that kind of environment, at least not in the United States.
So, Srinath, if you don't mind if I just add on to something on the ServiceNow approach. One of the, and it's probably would answer Jen's question around the data security part of it is, ServiceNow, like the first thing they tell you to basically implement is the vaccine consent, right? So there's before you can even look at a testing window or a vaccine window, you have to provide consent, right? So if you don't provide the consent for the data, you don't get to put in your vaccine information, you don't get to do your testing. I mean, it's a choice, right? So people have a choice of being able to do it. They're very early in this, but they're saying that the vaccine consent kind of absolves the legal issues, around responsible data storage. If you open it up to the world and have a data breach like anything else, you're responsible as a company. But if you implement, point security in place for specific individuals to view the data applied with the consent form, it seems to be, taking care of a lot of the vaccine issues.
Yeah, you definitely want to have your legal counsel involved in the team that's doing this. It's not, because it also varies from state to state. So that would just be my general guidance.
It's helpful. Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to try and switch the conversation to like more on the workforce aspect of it, like with kind of having more flexible workforce options for remote. How is your organization kind of shifting the future workforce strategy in terms of what talent you can recruit, what, whether, there's this one lone Ranger developer out in, Seattle, like, is your organization evolving to, leverage some of the newer options on the workforce recruitment, let's say, right? So maybe I'll start with Steve, you, and see, how do you see SAP evolving? It feels like SAP has already been in that mode, but how do you see broader organizations evolving?
Yeah, we're embracing it. I mean, I'm really thinking our leadership, and I think it does go back to that we were thinking a lot about this stuff before this happened. It was always like future of work, just because it's related to what we do as a company, right? Thinking about how's technology shaping the future of work. And so one of the things that we're definitely talking a lot about is career development, though, and onboarding. And what I think we're having a lot of conversations about now and have not figured out, because if we knew that we could just sort of have people come back into offices without being worried about the shutdowns and everything going up and down, we'd probably go more full speed ahead of like rethinking office design and putting programs in place for, in a virtual world, how do you welcome new team members into an organization and all that. We'd probably start putting more policies in place. I think there's a little reluctance to like make any strong statements because there's just so much variability from day to day. But I'm traveling right now. We're going back to travel. We're trying to be much more controlled about how we do it, which personally I'm really glad for, because I've been on my fair share of business trips that I probably didn't need to fly there to have the conversation. But I think where it's going to be really interesting is in our non-customer facing groups, like our engineering teams, rethinking how that affects their dynamic, because traditionally they were more co-located. So the good news is that, you know, we're located in like Palo Alto, which is an incredibly expensive place to get IT talent. And a lot of IT talent there flat out said they won't go back. They said, don't make me commute 2 hours again. And so really saying a lot of the agile team methodologies were built on this idea that everyone kind of in the same space. And so we're thinking about how do we redo that. But I think what we say is we know we don't want to go back. What was it one customer said? I don't want to go back to normal. I want to go forward to better. And that's definitely our philosophy.
Can't get off of mute fast enough. That's good to know, Steve. And we're seeing that in a lot of other companies too. So Tom, I know when we talked, you had talked about, you know, remote employees, how to kind of leverage contingent workforces, offshore resources, and some of the unique challenges you're seeing. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, you know, VERTEX traditionally was an East Coast, was a Philadelphia area company, right? We had established a really big stronghold, you know, both from a technology perspective, which I'll speak on, and a people perspective in the area. And, you know, we're competing with everybody here on this call for the same talent. With the shift to remote work, you know, we've implemented a program called World Class Talent Anywhere. You know, it's a pitch tool for being able to hire individuals pretty much anywhere in the globe. And since, you know, we've all departed the office, you know, our workforce has expanded through India, through, you know, we have a bunch of people in Eastern Europe, you know, even Western Europe, through South America now. So, you know, we're hiring the best people we can anywhere we can. You know, with that comes some problems. And it was, you know, foreseeable, but, you know, we're working through how to address them. And it's really around, with the workforce distributed remotely, you know, people that use normal contingent labor workforce, say you have a development center in India, right? They were, you know, in Hyderabad, they were in Bangalore, they were in a building, you had direct connectivity to them, you could manage all the experience right to the person. You know, now whether they're in rural Oklahoma or, you know, in the rural area of the Ukraine, you know, we're finding that this top class talent, you know, has varying conditions. So they always don't have the best experience. So for me, it's breaking down the stronghold in the East Coast and really going to a distributed infrastructure, I call it meeting people where they're at. So bringing infrastructure closer to them where I can control the conditions. You know, we're moving more towards a distributed edge model, a regional model of entry point into the cloud, because, you know, even with cloud technologies, you know, you can't control the connection between the cloud and their house all the time, right? And if you have, you know, depending on where it's positioned, you know, people have different experiential issues with it. So for us, it's getting them an entry point into our network that's closer to them, you know, in smaller pods, and then being able to optimize that experience. So for us, you know, putting clusters of edge technologies in Eastern Europe and Western Europe, in India, in Singapore, in South America, that then allows me to have better, you know, control of the experience closer to their house, you know, as well as advising them, right? You know, they need certain types of technologies to do their jobs in terms of internet access. Having one of the things we're seeing is people like to go sit out on a deck at lunchtime, and they're like, well, my Teams calls are terrible. Well, you're 200 feet away from your router, and a lot of this stuff is dependent on you. So we've also made some discretionary spend in some experience management tools that help us identify what's going on in user device, and the contingent worker for that matter, what's causing the problem, right? We've had to really extend out closer to them, both from our technology deployments and, being able to monitor and manage that experience.
Thanks, Tom. Certainly, we've seen some of the challenges too, because we do have some workforce in Europe and India, which had to kind of go remote, and our systems were built for the development center connectivity, right? So it was definitely a unique challenge. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, there's a question in the chat about as we kind of move to a more remote or hybrid approach, what strategies and approaches are companies successfully using? And I want to add another twist to it. How are your organizations, changing? I think, I forget, Kathryn or Tom, one of you touched on, how does leadership evolve to kind of support, the mentality of if I want to manage people, I want to see them in person, how does your internal processes and systems change to kind of continue having your culture sustained? So Kathryn, maybe we start with you.
This one's interesting because our IT department, even pre-pandemic, we were located in 2 different buildings. So it wasn't uncommon for your staff to not necessarily be in the same building that you were, even though we were all at the office. So pre-pandemic, the notion of managing, by line of sight wasn't really our reality, even though that was really more of the culture of the organization and the idea of, watching the clock and when people show up and when they leave, and those types of things. So that, I don't think for our department has been quite as much of a challenge, more so outward facing and being able to answer the question of, well, how do you know that you're being more productive now? And my question back to folks when they ask that is, well, we never measured it before, so why are you asking to specifically measure it now, right? And part of it is the proof is in our delivery last year at 100% of our capital plan and having more funding this year and more projects on the books. So I'm not sure if I quite answered your question on that one.
I think Kathryn, I just want to build So to build on what you said, which I like that, we never measured before, why should we do it? Which is a great point about what this is forcing on a positive and a change for us in SAP and all of our customers is it's forcing us to get much better at managing people. That we, as you said, we never measured before, but we should have had some way to measure it or something. And so I think it's in that sense, both with SAP, but a lot of our customers, what this really requires for this shift, I would say, in my experience, almost more than anything else, is really equipping managers to be more effective. This not just to be better, and there's a really good research from Qualtrics we work with that showed that employees that had managers that basically had regular role clarification conversations, gave good feedback, talked to people on a regular basis, basically did what a manager is supposed to do. When the shift to remote work happened, they went up, their engagement went up, but people that had bad managers, it went way down. So the manager is a critical link in this whole shift. So I think equipping managers on how to be better managers, and we use our technology to do that. So we have goal setting and feedback technology and listening technology that we're really starting to apply a lot more internally, more seriously than we did in the past. I mean, we always used it, but I think the other thing though is a new thing that's happening with managers, and this is partially just related to the accelerating pace of change in the world, is managers are increasingly, we're doing a lot of, a phrase my wife as a doctor says called caring for the caregiver. managers are the human face of the organization. I've had multiple managers say, I've had employees crying on the phone in a Teams call before, just overwhelmed by the stuff going on in their lives. And they're like, that's never happened before. And I think managers who are in the middle there's a lot more focus on what can we do to support the well-being of not just employees, but also the well-being and support of managers, because they're being asked to be better managers, and they're being asked to play this sort of empathetic role that they didn't have as much before. And I think that's a big shift. And if the linchpin of this change, I think, is managers getting really good at that.
That's a really good comment, Steve, because now you're seeing people in a much more personal setting. I know when we were doing the dry run, Kathryn, you were like, hey, you never know whether your dog's going to bark or your partner's going to walk in. You never know what's going to happen. But you're seeing people more, getting to know people more at a personal level, right? So it's a difference. The role of the manager and the leader in an organization definitely evolves.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too, that just to finish up, to raise a point Tom made too, that I've seen with a lot of our customers, is also part of that is managers coaching on employee well-being. So like one of the things as we go to remote work, one of our customers is a call center, and they said, we have to tell people you have to have childcare still. Just because you're working from home doesn't mean you can't have childcare, because that is untenable. It is, people want to think they can do both, but you can't. And so part of this is being realistic with employees so they don't burn themselves out. And the default, if you have, I think this is part of this trust of your employees. If you assume your employees are committed, and if you don't, that's a whole nother issue. But assuming your employees are committed, the biggest issue you're going to have is they work too much, not they work too little.
Tom, I wanted to see if you had any comments from VERTEX about how your organization is evolving its leadership and how you're trying to maintain your culture in this new work.
Sure. So, this is one of these items that really kind of operates on a pendulum. And I think, I can't say it's a panacea right now. I think it's actually overcorrected to collaboration is so intense right now that, we've emphasized like, be on camera, talk to people, we need to meet. We are meeting and meeting and meeting. Like I had yesterday morning at 10 a.m. I had 6 meeting overlaps. I have to tell 5 different groups of people, sorry, I can't make 10 o'clock. That's becoming more pervasive throughout the organization. As you can see, is that what do I say? Meeting etiquette, like virtual meeting etiquette, is declining. People are just throwing meetings on calendars because they want a broader audience of people, right? Where before it just might be, the 3 of us might get into a conference room. Now it expanded to 30 because, well, you're there. And for us, we're still trying to figure out how to move that backwards now, right? To say it like it's okay not to have as many meetings, or it's okay to limit your scope of collaboration, to give people a break, because the burnout's happening because you're spending 8 hours a day in video calls, and then you have to do 8 hours of actual work, whether it's responding to email, catching up on that. So for us, it's maybe less process and more discipline, like around the manager part, around making sure that they're guiding their employees to dial it back a bit.
I wanted to add one other thing that I didn't mention before. So, when we were all in the office, it was easy for me to also show appreciation to my team, buying lunch or doing those kinds of things when we could all be together. So I found that to be a challenge, in this remote setting. What can I do to also then show my appreciation for my team, or those types of things? So I've mailed packages actually to my team several times throughout this, just with small things that are thank yous, and also to show that and have that in conjunction with sort of like quarterly strategic planning sessions that we do together. Just, to try to find something. Or, at Christmas, we had a virtual lunch all together. I sent everybody money so that they could get, their own food and then bring it to the table, so that we could still have some semblance of some of those activities as well. So on the culture side, that is something that's definitely been, I would say, a challenge, but I think if you get creative you can certainly keep some of that momentum going as well.
It's a good reminder, Kathryn. We've kind of gone to like more digital gift cards, DoorDash gift cards, Uber Eats gift cards, just as a replacement for the in-person lunches. It's still not 100% replacement, but a good way to kind of have that continued practice.
Yeah.
Steve, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny hearing Tom and Kathryn, your comments about Tom, that we're collaborating too much, which actually is some research that's come out because it's easier to collaborate, which is exactly the opposite. Whenever you said, oh, we're not going to collaborate more, and it's actually, no, when we went to remote, it swung the other way. But then Kathryn's your point, which is really interesting, which is what we really want physicals getting together physical for is the non-collaboration. It's the emotional celebration, relationship, which has been one of the things with we do a lot of implementations of our technology, and talking to our partners that do implementations, one of them was saying, we're actually implementing faster and quicker and cheaper than we ever have before, because we used to get together to have these marathon 3-day workshops and everyone would burn out. And he goes, now we do it in lots of small little meetings. But they were saying when we start traveling again, we're going to use it much differently. We're going to start with a very short, everyone get together, get to know you. Let's build the foundation so that, and there's research on this that shows if you meet somebody one time physically, it kind of changes how you read their emails. You know, you have this sense of who they are just, and so they said we're going to get together, but to get together just to build the foundation of the team, not to necessarily like solve problems, but just get to know each other and say, hey, we're going to work together. And then we're going to get together to celebrate our wins and our successes. But we don't need to get together, you know, and obviously for some things it's really complicated. They said for a lot of the stuff that we used to think we had to get together to collaborate, we can do that virtually, but we can't effectively celebrate virtually, which Kathryn, like that what you said, it was like, that struck me, that it's almost the exact opposite of what everyone thought would happen.
Good point, Steve. As we come down to the end, I wanted to see I know the one, I'm sure everybody's reading kind of a lot of articles these days about future of work and how the world is evolving. The one term I keep hearing is the Great Resignation. Like, it seems like everybody's resigning. I don't know, that's what I read. It makes me sometimes feel like, wait, everybody's resigning? Like, I didn't know, I didn't get this notice. So is this real? Like, are your organizations seeing a big attrition as we come back to the new normal? Kathryn, maybe we start with you, and Steve, I'd want to definitely hear about what's happening across different organizations that you're talking to.
I don't think we're specifically seeing the Great Resignation just yet, but we have struggled in hiring staff for quite some time, particularly with our IT staff, in part being public sector, in part because of pension reform that happened recently. We're not nearly as attractive. We don't pay as much as the private companies. And now we're facing this if we don't really embrace the idea of hybrid or remote work, we're not going to have a talent pool from which to pick. There's already a shortfall of about 500 technologists in the central Pennsylvania area because folks are able to go to work for somebody else. So in my mind, we need to modernize our HR practices in order to be more current. We need to take a different look at what staff positions we need versus those that we will contract out, because we're always going to be relying on staff augmentation and outsourced project teams for certain things, just given the constraints that we do have. We currently have about 70 employees and 40 staff aug resources, in addition to all the project teams that we bring in to do our technology delivery. So I think part of the struggle for us lies in that we want to operate like a private sector business, but we have public sector policies that really dictate how we approach HR. And we also have the mix of both very white collar and blue collar jobs. And there's a desire to have equity for the entire enterprise, not just obviously for technology. But the way that seems to be put in place also seems to come back to equality. And I don't think that equity and equality have to be the same thing if the nature of certain jobs is very different. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get some momentum in that space as well. It'll allow us to stay more relevant as an employer in the tech space.
Thanks, Kathryn. Steve, any insights from SAP or the companies that you've been talking to? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Have to have at least one of those on a Zoom call, right? So, you know, there's one person put, I thought it was good to say, look, now people can change jobs without changing home addresses, right? It's just much easier for people to change. And plus, what happened with the pandemic is, you know, for a lot of professional jobs, it gave people a chance to sort of reassess life direction. I mean, that's what happens when you go through things like this psychologically. For a lot of our, for want of a better term, blue collar jobs, I don't know, this is not a good term, but hourly jobs, they're particularly like in hospitality and retail. There were a lot of people who basically used to be living paycheck to paycheck, and they got a chance to stop living paycheck to paycheck, and they said, this sucks, I'm going to do something else. And then when you had Walmart and Home Depot and other places raise their wages to like $16 an hour and provide benefits, it's totally transforming that market. So if you ever hear somebody complaining about they can't hire entry-level service staff, it's because they're not paying them enough. They're, you know, like, I don't have a lot of sympathy for it. It's not government handouts. There's pretty clear. It's like, no, they had lousy jobs and they had a chance to change them, and other companies pay them better and pay benefits. Do better by your employees. So, so there is this change. It is going on a lot. What our customers, I've seen with our customers, though, is there's tremendous variation across companies and how much it's affecting them. Look, one, it's an opportunity. If you're a magnet for talent, it's good because people aren't women are dropping out of the labor force entirely because of childcare issues. That's a different topic. But a lot of people are switching jobs, you know, to the companies. So the companies are seeing this as a chance to grab talent, which is a good thing. Also, a lot of companies I know that aren't necessarily trying to add talent, but they're saying, we're not seeing this resignation, but the ones that aren't seeing the resignation do things like, one of our customers, quarterly updates to their comp. They look at market survey of comp, because comp, especially in tech, is changing like monthly comp levels. So they proactively adjust people's compensation so people don't have that idea of the only way to get a raise is to go somewhere else. SAP did that too, actually, about before the pandemic. Significant. We looked across our whole company, and also we use that to address pay inequity and gender inequity in pay. So very proactively changing your base pay and your base comp on a regular basis. Don't punish people for staying with your company. And then really good management. The companies that do have good managers don't see this retention, because people don't necessarily want to quit jobs. But in this world, there's very low barrier if for some reason they start looking. And psychologically, the way people change jobs is it's very rare just to go one day and go, that's it, I quit. What happens is you kind of go, I kind of don't like this, or I don't like my manager, the work's boring, or I don't feel like I'm treated. And then you start to look outside, and then you find something that used to take months. Now it takes 5 clicks on LinkedIn. So you just need to make sure people don't mentally leave, you know, give them a reason to stay.
It's a really good practice, Steve. I know we're right up at the end of it. So I wanted to see if anybody had any questions they wanted to ask our panelists. We've had a really good discussion on different topics, but I want to see if anybody had any questions to the panelists. Feel free to raise your hand or go off mute and ask a question. All right, going once.
Hi, this is Leon. I actually had asked in the chat earlier, but I think I would like to sort of bring it back, which is how with everything being as remote and stuff, are people and organizations finding on helping new people get in and understand and sort of build and learn the culture, as well as to give people, you know, better exposure to people they're not crossing over with as much in any situations, but really like how you bring people new into your organizations.
Great question, Yana. Thanks for asking. Steve, you want to respond to that, and maybe Tom?
Yeah, I would defer to Tom and Kathryn. I can say what we're doing in SAP is we're still figuring it out. We've onboarded a lot of people. We have onboarding technology that helps people. That, as a manager, when somebody comes in, it says connect with these people, and we teach people how to onboard, but we're still definitely figuring it out. Tom and Kathryn, I'm curious how you're handling that.
Sure. So, from our perspective, again, it's a lot of it's like a listen and coach on this one. So, the big thing I'd like to talk about when we do the employee onboarding is really making sure that they get a person from IT kind of paired with them to kind of facilitate their entry into the workforce. Not just like, hey, here's your email, here's your chat. It's really, hey, we have a lot of these tools, and what has your experience been, and maybe where have you come from that we can do things a little bit better, right? It's taking the traditional business partner model, but maybe extending it down to the experience and really pairing it up with them from a push and a pull perspective.
Kathryn.
Yeah, so it's similar to what Steve said. I don't think we have it all figured out. We do have, we're continuing to evolve some checklists and people that you should meet, and having meeting with our CTO, meeting with all the directors, meeting with other key folks in IT to get to know who people are. And also one of the things that we've tried is giving new folks, new staff, the opportunity to get involved in certain working groups that are also across the organization. So, whether it's our employee association or other committees and task forces that we have, so that you also have an opportunity to interact with folks from other areas that you wouldn't ordinarily work with.
Yeah, I can speak for Vanguard. We had to really strengthen our onboarding practices to make sure that we're bringing everybody, when you come in, make that connection with some of the senior leaders. And then when you come in, you have some kind of buddy or mentor program where you can kind of connect with somebody who's been here a little longer and, learn the ropes, learn the culture, learn which committees and groups you can get involved in. So a little bit of more rigor around that onboarding, which used to happen naturally before. We're much more diligent right now. So I know we're right up on time. So I do want to take the time to thank all the panelists for doing a phenomenal job today. Thank you for sharing your experiences and how your organization's evolving. I will turn this over to Dean now.
Your timing is perfect, Srinath, and thank you to you and to all the panelists for a really insightful conversation. In chat right now, you will see the Remo link for all panelists, participants to head on over for about 20-25 minutes of networking. Again, this is face-to-face at tables, virtual tables. A real good opportunity just to really continue the dialogue for a few minutes from the conversations you heard this morning. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors, to all of you for your participation. We'll continue to gather throughout the course of this calendar and program year, and we'll do so in a combination of ways, both virtual and hopefully in person. And I'll just note that doing the virtual, as we talked about, has been really, really beneficial in a lot of ways. For example, we would have not had Steve Hunt on the call this morning, or excuse me, in person this morning, since he's based in Oregon. So grateful, Steve, for you getting up at the crack of dawn. And whether or not Kathryn would make that trip all the way on the Pennsylvania Turnpike to Philadelphia, who knows? But this is one of the benefits that we have for tapping the minds of some of the leading experts and practitioners. So again, thank you all for participation. Again, in chat right now, you can literally click on the Remo link and head on over for networking. Thanks so much.